Happy Friday, Ohio State fans. Welcome back to the 11 Dubcast for Friday, October 17th, on the eve of the Ohio State-Wisconsin game, which we're going to preview for you today with our deputy editor at 11 Warriors, Dan Hope. Dan, I missed you dearly for the Wednesday show. I'm relieved and glad to see you back. How are you doing today?
It's great to be back.
Well, like I said, I'm glad you're back, although I have to be honest. I have to hold you accountable for something that happened outside of the show that you did this week that was brought to my attention by Andy yesterday. But before we get into that, we do want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor at the 11 Dubcast and 11 Warriors this Ohio State football season. That would be First Bank of Central Ohio. From game day to workday, First Bank of Central Ohio is proud to support the business owners that keep Central Ohio thriving. They are locally owned, business focused, and always in your corner. Give them a visit at fbcentralohio.com. Dan, although I'm relieved to see you, I'm very disappointed in you because I spent all week talking up Dan the Oracle for dropping Penn State to the bottom of your coveted Big Ten power rankings and doing so before they lost to Northwestern. So in a way, you saw the collapse at Penn State coming before anybody else, and I couldn't stop heaping praise on your name for that. And then you come out with your next edition of the Big Ten power rankings and you slot Indiana above Ohio State. And not only do you do that, but on the episode of the Dubcast where you would normally come on to answer for such a thing, you make me go bring on Chris Lauderback and you duck being on the episode. But I'm not going to let you weasel out of it, Dan. You need to answer for your crimes now. Why do you have Ohio State below Indiana in these power rankings?
Well, I think I explained that in the article. I think if you compare their resumes side by side, I think Indiana's got the best win between the two teams. They went on the road, beat a top 10 team in Oregon. You also compare the only common opponent they have. Ohio State or Indiana beat Illinois by 53. Ohio State beat Illinois by 18. So if you're just going off the resumes, what they've done so far this year, in my opinion, Indiana has a better resume than Ohio State.
I think that's a very reasoned argument. I just had to hold your feet to the fire a little bit. I know that you incurred the wrath of the lunatic fringe among the 11 Warriors and Ohio State faithful, so I'm sure they just wanted to see you explain your opinion with a face attached to it instead of just your name on a byline. So given that you ducked the Tuesday show, the Wednesday show rather, I had to pick your brain a little bit about it. All right. So, easier topic to discuss relative to Ohio State would be this upcoming Wisconsin game. We want the best for Luke Fickell as a former Buckeye. That being said, Wisconsin seems to be far from that. They are on a 4-game losing streak, and as has been a common talking point on this show this week in invoking the upcoming game this weekend, they just got shut out at home by Iowa. And so it stands to reason that if they're getting shut out at home by Iowa, why would anything different happen when they're going to be playing not only an even more talented defense in the form of Ohio State, but arguably the best defense in college football and an opponent in Ohio State that seems to be trying to speed run the regular season at this point in terms of making games go as quickly as possible to the extent that they are not super competitive or threatening. They end quickly. Players get out of these games healthy, and they don't put a lot on paper in terms of anything more than what's just very plain execution that you can kind of expect and doesn't necessarily need to be schemed against or analyzed on film in order to prepare for, so that they're not showing their whole hand to their future opponents that they actually think they're going to have to compete with. The line for this game opened at around 4 touchdowns, 28.5 points. It's dropped a little bit. But again, you're talking about a team that, in addition to getting shut out last week, gave up 37 points to an Iowa team that is not really known for being an offensive juggernaut in recent seasons. And they did this at home at Camp Randall. the vibes around this Wisconsin team are not good right now. And granted, they dealt with some early injury struggles that really sapped any sort of enthusiasm you might have had about them going or coming out of the preseason. That being said, we're in the middle of the season now. This team is arguably at a low point, and it's a very, very bad time to host the number one team in the country. Spoiler alert, where I said we're jumping right into scoring predictions because there's not much more that needs to be said about them than what I just relayed. We're both picking shutouts this weekend, and I believe, are two of the four people on staff that are doing so. My question for you, Dan, is if Wisconsin scores, what does it possibly look like against Ohio State in this game?
Yeah, I mean, maybe something fluky happens on special teams. Maybe it's the fourth quarter. Ohio State's got all the backups in. They score on the second team. I mean, I think for Ohio State's defense, I mean, and they talked about it last week. Like, they were disappointed they gave up double digits at Illinois. They're disappointed anytime they don't shut the opponent out. I think they'd be very disappointed if they don't shut out Wisconsin because, like you said, they missed a team that just got shut out last week. Their offense is, if in terms of scoring offense, is the worst offense in the Power Four. It's by far the worst offense in the Big Ten. They're basically down to their third string quarterback, Hunter Simmons, a guy who started, I believe, 3 games at Southern Illinois, and now he's the starting quarterback at Wisconsin. There is a little bit of a competition, I guess, this week with him and Danny O'Neal, who started the year as the backup quarterback. But either way, it's not going to be a great situation. This is a Wisconsin program. You think about Wisconsin being built on having these great offensive lines. They do not have a great offensive line this year. They really offensively are not good in any area. I mean, defensively, they're okay, but offensively, they are one of the worst teams in the country. And so I think, for Ohio State's defense, the goal is absolutely a shutout. And I think that if they play the way we've seen them play all year, that's a very realistic goal.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't take shape. I believe I said 38-0, you said 42-0, so we're both pretty much on the same page in terms of how this one goes, give or take a touchdown versus a field goal. Wisconsin is 121st out of, I think, 135 FBS teams in estimated points added per pass. They are 99th estimated points added per rush, 121st in terms of gaining the actual available yards per play. They are a very, very bad offense. Arguably, I don't know about the worst offense they've played relative to Grambling State, but you would think, given the more stern challenges Ohio State has already had in the first half of the season, that even with the atmosphere that Camp Randall presents on a late Saturday afternoon, this is not really going to be one where we're going to be sweating that much. It will probably be one of the quieter jump arounds that has ever happened in that stadium, at least in recent memory. It's funny that you bring up the recent or the historical identity of Wisconsin, because one of the talking points this week has been what the future of Luke Fickell is at Wisconsin, relative to some comments that have been made by Barry Alvarez of late. Specifically, him talking about what Wisconsin used to be when he was the one running the show for the Badgers. Now, 3 weeks ago, when the vibes still weren't great, but Wisconsin wasn't, neck deep into this 4-game losing streak, he said on his own show, I think it's literally called the Barry Alvarez Show, but it's a podcast that's like sponsored by ESPN Madison or something. But in any event, he said, Wisconsin fans are spoiled rotten, which anytime an AD makes a comment like that, I just like to think about it in terms of, what if Ross Bjork or Gene Smith had come out and said that about like Ohio State fans? And then that was, of course, 3 weeks ago. And then you follow that up with comments he made this week, where he was openly lamenting the fact that the Luke Fickell era doesn't really have an identity at Wisconsin, and it doesn't really look like the program that he directly compared it to what he had built when he was the head coach at Wisconsin. And in terms of actually building an identity at this point of the season, he said it's too damn late. If Wisconsin gets shut out at home on back-to-back weeks, even if on the back end of that, you're talking about the number one team in the country and a team that they're projected to lose by roughly 4 touchdowns, does Luke Fickell make it out of the weekend still as his head coach? Because there were a lot of people that were surprised that, in addition to James Franklin and a couple of other coaches at the FBS level getting let go last weekend, that Fickell wasn't among the ones that got cut loose, given the result against Iowa. If they put up another donut, a double donut, is this it for Fickell, or do you think that he potentially makes it to the end of the season, regardless of what continues to take shape?
I lean toward him making it at least another week, because I feel like if you were going to fire him mid-season, like last week was the week to do it. It would seem particularly cruel to wait until he loses to his alma mater to fire him this weekend. And so I lean toward him getting the rest of the season. I did our across the field Q&A with Colton Bartholomew, who's one of the best beat writers who covers Wisconsin for the Wisconsin State Journal, and he said, the AD there, Chris McIntosh, he hired Luke Fickell. His job is almost viewed as tied to Luke Fickell's job, and so he's going to maybe give Luke Fickell a little more leeway in terms of giving him every chance to save his job. That being said, it's hard to envision this at this point ending any other way than Wisconsin having a new coach next year, because you look at their schedule, they are going to be the underdog in every game they play the rest of the year. They seem to be on a path toward going 2-10. Now, granted, a few weeks ago I said UCLA was on a path to going 0-12, so things can change, but you just look at their schedule. It doesn't let up. They still have to play Oregon. They still have to play Indiana. They still have to play Illinois. They still have to play Washington. Their most winnable game is basically a road game at Minnesota at the end of the year. So like the schedule is unrelenting. So there's going to be plenty of opportunities, I think, for Luke Fickell to potentially get fired as the season progresses. I don't think it happens this weekend after a game against his alma mater, but if they get shut out again, back-to-back shutouts in Camp Randall, that'd be tough to swallow. And I do think if this game plays out the way we think it will, we're certainly going to hear more fire Fickell chants in Camp Randall this weekend.
Yeah, I think the calls are only going to intensify, but I tend to agree with you that if it wasn't going to happen last weekend, in the context of them kind of having their season imploded from the start with the injury issues, and then having such a difficult schedule on the back end where you would expect them to lose a lot of those games under those circumstances, even if you're disappointed with the overall Fickell tenure, you still have to take a look at the entire product relative to expectations for this season specifically and wonder, did he really get a fair shake? Now, it's still your job, I think, as a coach to try to, roll with the punches a little bit and draw as much success out of the season as you can. That being said, it's still it's a tough time to be a Wisconsin Badgers fan. I can at least sympathize with them on that front. And we certainly want the best for any Buckeye, past, present, or even future. But it's been a rough go for Fickell, unfortunately, since he made the decision to leave Cincinnati. Should the worst come to pass, do you think there's a potential that he ends up back on this team, potentially in some sort of analyst role next season, a defensive analyst, or potentially even defensive coordinator if Matt Patricia gets lured back to the NFL?
I don't rule it out. I'd be surprised if it was a defensive coordinator situation. I think I'd say if probably the most logical path back to the staff would be if Larry Johnson chose to retire after this year. They needed a new defensive line coach. Luke Fickell is a former Ohio State defensive lineman, has experience coaching that position. I think that's a role that would make sense for him if he was to get let go at Wisconsin, was interested in returning to his alma mater. If I was betting on it, I'd probably bet on him being a defensive coordinator somewhere else next year. But I certainly don't rule out the possibility that he could come back to his alma mater, because, Ohio State's had pretty good success recently, whether it be Brian Hartline, James Laurinaitis, Tim Walton, bringing back former players to be coaches on their staff. So I mean, all indications are Ryan Day and Luke Fickell are at least cordial with each other. I don't know how well they know each other because their paths didn't directly cross in terms of working together at Ohio State, but they obviously have a lot of mutual connections. So my guess would be there'd probably be a conversation. Whether it would lead to anything, probably too early to say. But, and to your point, probably somewhat depends on, does Matt Patricia stay on beyond this year?
Well, if Ryan Day truly wants Luke Fickell back on his staff, then the best way to expedite that process would be to win 42-0, as you predicted, this coming weekend. Yeah, Larry Johnson, it'll be interesting to see what happens with him, because I'm sure the lunatic fringe that has been calling for his retirement for years has not been having a good week with that, between Caden Curry finding himself among the top 10 in sacks in FBS so far this year. And as we're recording this Thursday night, Ohio State landed, I believe, the number 2 overall defensive lineman, 5-star recruit in the 2028 recruiting class. So it's been a nice bounce back stretch for Larry Johnson this year relative to the calls for his retirement among the people that have been wanting so for years. But I hope, obviously the guy's had several years of success in this program at this point. I wouldn't necessarily want to see him replaced by the likes of Luke Fickell anytime soon, but he is, he's his own man, and he'll hang it up when it's ready. But I hope he sticks around for a little bit longer, because he's still showing that he's got something left. So that'll be it for the Dubcast this week. This was a quicker preview than I think the ones we've done in recent weeks. But again, this is a game in which we're not expecting the opponent to score any points. That's not rooted in homerism. That's just based on what recent history would tell you. So we expect good things for Ohio State this weekend. We don't expect good things for Wisconsin, but we certainly hope the best for Luke Fickell's future, regardless of whether it's with the Badgers or potentially with the Buckeyes in the near or far future once again. So, that in mind, Dan, you do have to make the trip to Camp Randall today. So I wish you and the rest of the beat safe travels in doing so. And yeah, the game will be on 3:30 Eastern tomorrow on CBS. So make sure you tune in for that, and check back in with 11 Warriors before, during, and after the game to keep you updated on everything going on with Ohio State football. And looking ahead into, well, we've got the bye week next week, but then we've got a game that went from highly anticipated to not nearly as anticipated in Penn State when this team comes back for November 1st. So we're looking forward to that one. But Buckeyes got to take care of business in Madison, Wisconsin first, and we look forward to seeing that Saturday. So with that in mind, thank you for tuning into the 11 Dubcast this week. We will be back to recap the Wisconsin game and any other crazy stuff that happens in college football this weekend, Monday morning with Chase Brown. Until then, thank you, and go Bucks. Take care, folks.